talk about something a little bit more personal today. As you might have noticed after Koth's video, I actually did a little bit of decorating so you can't see my dirty wall. Yes, it was dirty. But I did want to talk about something a bit more personal today. It seems like you guys do genuinely like to hear about some of my experiences, so I thought I would break down a couple of them into one cohesive video. I don't really know how this is gonna do, but hey, we can at least try, right? So I've alluded to it a few times before in other videos and sometimes in live streams, but I've dealt with a bit of emotional abuse here and there, and it hasn't always been pleasant. Actually, it's never pleasant in general when you use the word abuse. But let's talk about what emotional abuse really is. So my first real experience with this kind of came to me a bit later in life. Some people experience it younger, maybe high school, maybe elementary school, sometimes with their parents or upbringing. I was blessed not to really have parents that did that. What I did have was when I got to college, I got my first experience with a genuinely abusive person, and that sucked. So my first real relationship in college that I got serious about was someone who was in the armed services. I will not say which branch because I don't want to demonize the branch. It is not their fault. But I got with someone who they weren't good, basically. They had a very twisted sense of humor, which I guess at the time I didn't really notice, and they had a very skewed view of the world. They were also younger than me. That might have been my first mistake. But after dating them for quite a bit, it became very obvious to me that something wasn't quite right. And I actually found out from some of their colleagues that they had been cheating on me almost every single weekend that I was out doing competitions. Not exactly good. This kept going for a bit, and then I confronted them about it, and it ended up in a huge hot mess. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say that was a little bit closer to the 3 or 4 on the scale compared to everything else I've experienced. And what I should have learned from that was how to identify signs of abusive behavior. But I didn't. I just assumed that I had met a dud, and that was the only issue. My second experience came towards the tail end of college, when I started seeing this amazing girl that I really liked, and her friend also happened to really like me. Now, she was awesome. She was very sweet, kind, caring. She did have some problems with drugs, which it happens, but I was noticing the more and more I hung out with both of them, the more and more I realized I really liked both of them. And in my naivete, did not realize that neither of them wanted that. But both of them were so into me, they just kind of went with it. In the future, if you ever have a relationship which is more open and you're interested in seeing multiple people at the same time, communication is very key. And that's what didn't happen. There was never a time when it was communicated to me that neither of them wanted that. They just kind of went, okay. So I was like, great. I have these two amazing people that I can share this connection with. And that went sour real fast. I ended up leaving her for him, which was very stupid. And I started noticing things that I hadn't noticed before because I'd kind of had her as a buffer, such as a tendency to contact me all of the time. A tendency to get really frustrated when I didn't respond immediately. He would show up at my parents' house. He would send me almost bipolar messages of how much he really liked me and then how terrible I was for not immediately dropping everything to go hang out with him. Yeah, we can see where this is going. No, we're good. So after I went to a competition, I actually got a deranged phone call of him berating me about how I was so garbage. You know, I didn't deserve him. I had better drive all the way back to New Jersey to go see him immediately because, you know, I needed him. And that kind of freaked me the hell out. At the same time, he was verbally berating the other girl that I had been seeing before, who I had managed to stay friends with despite, you know, not doing that anymore. And she was going off the deep end because he was really driving her off a cliff, basically, emotionally. And she was in really bad situation. And I was literally just trying to compete at a competition upstate, so I did not drive home, obviously. And I told him to calm down and then I would be back in like 3 or 4 days. It was a competition. I had just driven like 3-ish hours to go compete in. I wasn't about to turn around and drive home. So what he ended up doing was leaving probably 20 voicemails on my phone, basically threatening me, like, I'm gonna come up there and bring you home. And I was with my parents at the time who did not understand what was going on, and I didn't want to tell them because I had been trying all this time to convince them that he was not a terrible person. In retrospect, they were right. He was a terrible person. Bad on me. So this kept going on, and then finally, I said, I'm done. I can't do this. You're driving me insane. Now I don't feel safe because you're one way one day, another way the next, and you don't seem particularly sorry about it. So then what happened was I went to take some summer courses down at University of Pennsylvania. And understandably, where he was living was really close to my parents in New Jersey. So I didn't tell him because we weren't dating at this point, we weren't speaking. While I was in class at University of Pennsylvania that summer, he actually drove to my parents' house and tried to drop off flowers without telling me, without telling my family, and in a state of complete deranged lunacy, banging on all the doors trying to get in. Thankfully, a neighbor called the police and he left, but he left the flowers there, which then my mom picked up, having no idea why they were there, and realized it was from this crazy guy. And at that point, I was pretty freaking terrified, so I actually reached out to his family and said, what the hell? Why won't he leave me alone? I've had to call the police. This is insane. So I ended up having to block his number. I moved to New York and I did everything I could to get him as far away as possible. And to this day, he hasn't reached back out, thanks to the good graces of his brother, who has been able to just keep him the hell away from me. On a scale of 1 to 10, that was right about a 5. Now, the next experience I had with emotional abuse was this guy I was seeing in Pennsylvania once I got my first job in New York. It started out great. Nice guy, very sweet, but at this point, I had learned from my past relationships that I'm not really good with monogamy. I'm polyamorous. I like open relationships. I like having that freedom. It's not for everybody, it is for me. So we get to dating, and suddenly, about 2.5 months in, I start to notice some kind of bad behavior. Basically that anytime we get into an argument, he doesn't like to lose, ever. Won't acknowledge that maybe I might be right on something. And instead of understanding that I'm poly, so I'm not going to be very happy in a monogamous relationship, instead of going, okay, you know what, let's just agree not to date then because I don't think this will work. He actually pressured me routinely to go on dates all of the time, and it was very uncomfortable. And then finally, after date number 3, he pretty much pressured me into a monogamous relationship, which from the outset I was a little not sure about. Well, come month 5 of seeing this person, we're fighting all of the time. I have gone to break up with him now 4 or 5 times, and he has pretty much gaslit me with, well, no one will ever like you. You should feel so special because, I took a chance on you. Like, you're never gonna find anyone. Like, you're not gonna be happy unless you're with me because I'm the only person that'll love you. And at that point, I felt something familiar that I felt in a previous relationship, and was like, this doesn't seem safe. So I got pressured to go to EDC with him and pretty much broke up with him maybe a week or so before. Had to take the same flight, which was so uncomfortable. And at EDC, I started noticing that he was just behaving like an ass. So I ended up taking all of my stuff out of his room, moving it to my friend's room, and trying my best to salvage the situation. He continued to try to contact me to say, like, well, we should get back together because I'm sure you're not meeting anyone that really loves you, like, you unappreciative, BITCH. And eventually had to block him on everything and cut him out of my life. I'd say, in terms of emotional abuse, he was around a 4.5 or a 5, just with how nasty the fighting got. Then fast forward to my previous relationship that I just got myself out of. You guys know what happened there. I told you in a full audio log. What I didn't tell you is he's still trying to reach out to me and still trying to use his dad to get his stuff back that's been sitting here since March, and I guess legally could count as abandoned, as in I don't have to give it to him. And what he's been doing for the past couple weeks is giving me times and dates that he's gonna come pick it up and then not showing up, so that I have to keep waiting for him to set a date to come and get it. As of today, I've given him basically 24 hours to do that, and then I'm just gonna pack everything and leave it at the front desk, and I'm not going to deal with him. So what have I learned from these experiences? Well, I've learned before you get into anything serious with another person, spend a lot of time with them as a friend and understanding how they actually are. Put them in situations where you might get to see more of them. If you have an argument, pay really close attention to how they're arguing with you. If they have the capacity to try and understand your side and actually give you the time of day, and even if they disagree, they try to understand where you're coming from, you might be okay, but keep an eye out for behaviors that are really, really concerning. Here are some things to keep an eye out for that might point you in the direction of this may not be a good idea.
Here are some signs listed on Fog, a website that does do a lot of amazing looks into behavior that is abusive towards others emotionally. Take a good look, see if you recognize any of these things. If you or a friend have experienced any of this type of behavior, take a really close look at the relationship you're in. You might be in an abusive situation and not even know it. Most people don't realize that they are, and the first step is identifying these signs and actively avoiding people who exhibit them. Now, if you yourself exhibit some of this behavior, take a close look at yourself. What you may be doing is emotionally hurting someone and not even realizing it. So, in both situations, take a good look and try to avoid this type of behavior if you can.
Now, if you are a survivor of emotional abuse and you've gone through it, here are some really great ways that you can kind of push through and help heal from the entire situation.
Follow these 10 steps if you are recovering. However, if you're still in a relationship, look at these guidelines for what not to do and what you should do in these situations to help get yourself out of an already abusive relationship that you are currently in. Remember, take care of yourself and be safe.
Anyways, I hope this was interesting for you guys. Have a lovely rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!